very much. Oh boy, oh boy. Okay, here we go.
Apple TV's Ted Lasso once again took home Outstanding Comedy Series at the 74th Primetime Emmy Awards. My question is, why? I know asking that is pointless because award show voters don't watch TV, but for this exercise, let's assume that they do. For a comedic series, Ted Lasso is very interesting because it's not very interesting at all. Despite the Emmys and hundreds of millions of ad dollars that Apple has paid to promote the show, it really is the most inconspicuously good show. And there are reasons for that. It's not distinctly funny or inventive with its use of humor. I can't say I've ever had a laugh out loud moment watching Ted Lasso. It also doesn't carry a specific emotional appeal or tone that resonated with me in any unique way. The second season was noticeably more poignant and definitely made me cry, but never really found an emotional insight that felt like the show's own. It also isn't particularly inventive with how its subject matter or narrative is presented, shot, or edited. It ventured into the more weird and surreal with the episode following the beard around on a night out, but for as fun as that night was, did it not just feel like it was cosplaying as Master and Nun, Louis, or Atlanta? Short answer, it did. But with all this being said, I still really love this show, despite its failure at attaining greatness. So, in this video, I want to discuss why Ted Lasso, of all the shows I've ever seen, is the ideal benchmark show to separate good from great TV, and how the show succeeds without a defining competitive advantage. I know, this is a weird premise. And it's a weird premise partly because it feels like I'm really sliding the show and dismissing it by keeping it away from the great shows, and you can look at it that way, but you could also say this: it's as good as you can make a show without being a great show. So maybe we should start by defining what makes a TV show great and what makes a TV show good. Spoiler alert, it's very subjective. A great show is any show that I would happily watch again, any show that dazzles me, anything in the range of an 8 to a 10. A good show is any show that I will happily watch to completion, any show that I find myself enjoying, anything in the range of a 6 to an 8. I know that probably does nothing for you, so let's dive a little deeper. At the end of the day, how good something is all comes down to personal enjoyment. But what is enjoyment, or rather what is enjoyment composed of? Well, here's how I see it. For TV, music, film, there's 4 major categories that matter. The first is one I label voice. Is the show specific? Can only this filmmaker/writer make this film? This is more about the writing and direction, and it's worth 27.5% of the rating. The next category of interest is scope. Is the show inventive or ambitious? This is a category that Ted Lasso scores much lower in, and more on that later, but it's worth less than any other factor at 20%. The next category, of which I've labeled art, surrounds the technical aspects of the film or TV show and how well they serve the narrative. This is where I'm more individually looking at the cinematography, editing, score, soundtrack, whatever. This is worth the most at 30%. Finally, you can't talk about any form of art without talking about emotion, and it doesn't matter which emotions are triggered, more about how well they are and how they stick to you after viewing. This is worth the remaining 22.5%. And before we move on to the show, I must note here that shows have to be taken for what they are. You can't look at a sitcom and directly compare its scope to The House of the Dragon with its budget of $20 million per episode. Anyways, this is how Ted Lasso scores in my system, so let's talk about it. Ted Lasso is a fish-out-of-water sports comedy about an American college football coach tasked to lead a failing football club in the UK, despite nearly everyone around him, including the owner, the players, and the media, wanting him to fail. It's a fantastic premise, and watching everyone slowly fall in love with Ted feels just so good. I remember when the show first came out, and every Apple Store employee was programmed to say, you know, with Apple TV Plus, I recommend watching Ted Lasso. It's a funny show with a lot of heart. And I always wish that I was conscious enough in those moments to be like, yeah, that's like every American sitcom notwithstanding Sunny and Curb. But I'm not going to criticize something for being sugary, not just because that's a lazy, edgelordy thing to do, but because I love that kind of stuff. I love cute, tender moments. I love the dart scene. How could you not fucking love the dart scene? And before I go on, I will say that that episode to the end of season 1 is undeniably great. It hits its emotional beats out of the park. There's really nothing else I could say.
Barbecue sauce.
While I have to agree with most of Josh Hamilton's criticisms in his article titled "Ted Lasso is a perfect show if you hate laughing," one thing I think he entirely misses is that Ted Lasso's lessons aren't solely taught through Ted. And just because everyone turns out to be lovable doesn't mean that they don't have interesting dynamics and personality clashes. In regards to the first point, sure, Ted is often the voice of morality, but he's not some wise wizard who always makes the right call. The team was terrible in the first season and pretty good in the second. It's not like he was more Ted Lasso-y in the second season and that's why they were better. In the same way, it takes a lot of effort to be nice to people in real life, a hell of a lot more effort than being a dick. It takes a lot of effort to write a comedy about being nice to people in a way that's not boring and especially in a way that doesn't feel too preachy. The show is excessively nice and Ted might be a little bit too perfect, but the show doesn't always make Ted out to be Jesus. Emily St. James echoes this in her article responding to the backlash received from Season 2 not having very much conflict, arguing that in Season 1, Ted Lasso was about its main character's core philosophy and an overarching vibe of gentle whimsy and kindness. None of those traits won soccer games. AFC Richmond still lost the big match in the season finale. As such, Season 2 is doubling down on the idea that just being a good guy doesn't mean that you're automatically without problems. It's been discussed at length how Ted demonstrates quote-unquote toxic positivity and how it led to Nate's betrayal, and I thought both the addition of the therapist character and the fall of Nate the Great was done excellently. And finally, I cannot end my praises for the show without recognizing how fantastic the performances are, especially from Hannah Waddingham and Jason Sudeikis.
Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father.
He told me enough. He told me you killed him.
No. I am your father.
Jason Sudeikis and other writers on the show have described the second season as the series' Empire Strikes Back, arguing that because Ted has mental health problems and daddy issues, that the show has reached a dark chapter. But did it? For context, at the end of Empire, Han is literally frozen in carbonite. Luke gets bodied by Vader, loses his hand, and it's revealed that this space Hitler dude is his dad. It's very hopeless. At the end of Lasso Season 2, Richmond gets promoted to the Premier League, Keely is financed for her own PR firm, Sam opens a Nigerian restaurant. It's a pretty happy ending, all things considered. While there are parallels and references to Star Wars throughout Ted Lasso, and even though they lose Nate to the dark side, it's not a very strong commitment to being more tragic and subversive. Especially when we compare the second season to the first, it seems like Ted's conflicts are much more oppressive earlier on in the show. I mean, literally no one was on his side. Not the fans, not the owner, not the players, not the media, not even his wife. She wanted space. Now look, I'm not saying that you need to have downer endings like BoJack Horseman to be great, and I don't think Seinfeld's no hugging, no learning attitude should be applied to the contemporary sitcom. But to be great, you must find new ways or a new perspective to tell your story from, and you have to take risks. As I mentioned previously, a great show is one that I would happily watch again, any show that dazzles me, anything in the range of an 8 to a 10. A good show is one that I will watch to completion, any show that I find myself enjoying, anything in the range of a 6 to an 8. By this system, Ted Lasso is a show I really enjoyed, but wasn't dazzled by, and I think this is by design, and explains why it's such an awards show darling. This is because Ted Lasso gets all the credit for being a deep show without bearing any of the risks involved in making a genuinely deep show. Great shows, the best shows, challenge you, they demand something. I'm not saying that they make you question your political beliefs or convince you that raisins belong in a cookie, but they make you think, or they do something not necessarily controversial but off the beaten path. What does Ted Lasso make you think about, really? It definitely reinforces ideas about what it means to be a good person or some of the sport movie tropes that you grew up watching, but where are the novelties in form or even message? Where are the risks? Community's evolution into the homage and insightful takes on film and TV tropes really could have been awful. The jokes and references needed to be fresh for it to succeed. The familiar, albeit very well written, cute little show it was early season 1 could not be what it was forever to be great. Atlanta's adventures into the surreal really could have been awful as well. Being weird for the sake of being weird is really easy to point out these days. The social commentary and aesthetic needed to be fresh for it to succeed. The show that Donald Glover probably pitched about a dropout and his rapping cousin trying to make it in the rap game could not be all that it was to be great. I'm not sure everyone fully appreciates this, but TV is really, really, really good right now. We are still in the golden age, especially for a sitcom or a dramedy. Not only do you have to have this great pilot and character dynamics and be funny when you need to and emotional when you need to, but you also need to have your own unique thing that makes your show yours. This could be a refreshing cultural perspective that you write from, or a new structure or topic or style or humor or whatever, but you gotta have it like Pepsi. You gotta have it like Pepsi. What I'm trying to say is that competitive advantage needs to be there, and it needs to be obvious. If Ted Lasso came out in the 80s, yeah, it might be the best show ever. It would be Michael Jordan. But have you seen the state of the current NBA? Okay, maybe I'm mixing my references, but you get the point. Ted Lasso, to me, hasn't expanded upon its core premise enough into that unknown, at least yet, and that's why it scores so low in terms of scope. Why it's still such a good show to me is because its pilot was so strong, and that its characters are people we want to spend time with. Ted Lasso is, as promoted, chicken soup for the soul, and by design created to tell very by design stories. If the drama isn't compelling or virtually non-existent, don't matter. Heartwarming story. If the jokes don't land, or as they sometimes are, irritatingly broad, don't matter. Heartwarming story. The real reason why I can't put Ted Lasso into the Hall of Fame is that, for as good as it is, for these reasons, it's too replaceable. When season 3 ends, I know full well that I'll find another show to fill my needs for heartwarming comedies. Unless, of course, Ted ventures into that unknown and demands that we come along with it. Thanks guys for watching. I encourage all of you guys to make your own system for reviewing media. It doesn't have to be as concrete as this seems, and before you ask, no, I don't go into Adam Sandler movies with a pen and paper and check off whether each fart joke triggered an emotional response in me. It's not really as deep as I made it out. But even if you don't fancy yourself a TV snob, watching with a critical eye will likely give you a greater appreciation for the art and will help inspire ideas that you can apply to your own work. So, I ask you guys, what is your Ted Lasso, the show that separates good from great? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.